Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Regina Vignone with Sophos, and I'll be serving as your moderator today. For some of you, we might have met you at the AWS reInvent show last month, and want to thank you for joining us for today's webcast, Getting Started with Your Sophos UTM Test Drive in AWS Cloud. Our presenter today will be Bill Prout, one of our senior support network security experts, and he'll be taking you through today's session. He'll be talking about how Sophos UTM and AWS provides all the features you need to protect your VPC and EC2 instances, and he'll also show you how to get your test drive started. At the end of this presentation, there will also be a brief Q&A session. So during Bill's presentation, please feel free within the questions box, go ahead and enter your questions. We will go ahead and address at the end of the presentation. Also, today's presentation that Bill is doing will be recorded, and we will make it available on demand within 48 hours. You'll receive an email follow-up that will have the link to the version. Finally, you can go ahead and maximize the presentation by clicking the icon in the top right-hand corner of the window or selecting full screen from the Citrix menu. So, Bill, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
All right. Well, thanks very much, Gina, and thanks everybody for joining us today. You should be able to see on the screen, I hope, slide with Sophos UTM and AWS and my mouse movement. Gina, can you confirm you can see that?
Yes, I can see that, Bill. Thank you.
Excellent. So I'm assuming that everybody is familiar with AWS, but just as a quick review, we'll just take a quick look because what we're talking about here really is the shared security model that AWS uses, and why that's important and why folks need the type of solutions that Sophos can help them out with to make sure that their data and their users are protected in cloud just like they would on be on a physical network. So different cloud providers use different methods referred to as SaaS or software as a service and platform as a service, and AWS uses infrastructure as a service. And there's different things that are involved in these different solutions, but basically what it means is that IaaS providers are really more concerned with the infrastructure level, where they're going to provide protection for things like their data center, their hypervisors, and they really leave it up to the customer to provide the security that's needed for the applications. And that's in contrast to the SaaS providers. Salesforce.com is a very good example, where they're more concerned with helping protect your data and controlling access to it, okay, because that's what their business is all about. But Amazon is really working more at the infrastructure layer. And the result of that is that when you do actually build instances or virtual private clouds on Amazon, what you're really getting for security that you can see many times through the console is basically a firewall. So you're able to build out security groups to specify the networks, the IP addresses, the ports, etc., that are going to be allowed through AWS's infrastructure and given access to your resources. So that's not too much protection when you really think about it. It gives you a very basic level, but then, as you know from the physical world, we need to worry about the applications themselves, exploits and vulnerabilities and so forth. And one of the things that's missing from this that you might notice is visibility. As anybody who's working with networks today realizes, that's a big part of understanding what's going on so that you can properly secure your network. So that shared security model is very effective from Amazon's point of view because it allows them to give a good level of security and assurance at very low layers so that customers can do whatever they'd like to. It gives a lot of flexibility in that sense. But for customers, they need to realize that they still have a great amount of responsibility for securing their applications, understanding where their responsibility starts. And again, that's where Sophos can really help you out. So our Sophos UTM product, at a very basic level, is going to give you some of the functionality that you're finding with Amazon in the form of a firewall, which you can use or you cannot use. But what the real power that we're offering is layered security. So besides just that firewall, we're also giving you quite a bit of logging and reporting. So that can be useful because even if you're just using it to augment the Amazon firewall rules in place, you're at least able to really get a good look at the traffic that's coming in, understand amounts, get some metrics on that kind of stuff. And it's also obviously useful for troubleshooting. For anybody who has ever had to troubleshoot a connection, from one machine to another, something like the Sophos UTM can really help you out there. And as mentioned, what we're doing is we're giving you the ability to layer security so that you're able to use things like an intrusion prevention system so that you can take a look at traffic that may be allowed through the firewalls and really take a closer look to determine is there any malware in the payload, are there any protocol exploits, anomalies, etc. And again, get good reporting on that information so you can see what's going on. We also offer various VPN options because securing your connections and your data as it goes from, say, the physical world to Amazon, or even within Amazon from one region to another, say, is very important. And the same is true for users. You need a way to give them secure access to the instances that you create in Amazon. And so we offer a number of different VPN options. Now, the UTM itself is also able to function in a number of ways to secure not only those users, but to connect other networks. Those networks can be obviously physical networks, and you can do that through different types of VPN connections. And you can even use the UTM in the cloud to control things like wireless access points so that you're actually outsourcing or having just a larger area of coverage for something like your wireless deployment. You can also provide endpoint protection for the UTM. So another layer of protection for servers, make sure they have antivirus, for instance, client machines, wherever they might be. Even control things like web policy, what data can be moved on or off the device, the endpoint device, by controlling things like USB ports. And this is increasingly important, this type of control and protection, because as you've probably seen, Amazon is actually evolving and they're offering new products. At the show, they talked about a great new product with virtual desktops. And so a lot of the challenges and concerns that we have with desktops in our regular networks, we're now going to have in our physical environments, our cloud environments. So we may want to take a look at things like understanding the applications that are in use, controlling things like, BitTorrent so people can't download copyrighted material from these virtual desktops or physical again. Making sure that, again, they're protected with malware and maybe using any kind of standard content filtering control to just really get a handle on what kind of websites and categories are allowed to go to. And then some commonly used features that we see in Amazon are protecting internet-facing servers. So whether it's a mail server that you're protecting because you're checking for spam and phishing and all types of attempts, the UTM has that type of protection. And of course, web server protection. We often see customers moving their web servers to the cloud. It's one of the first pieces that they decide to move. Having a real web application firewall is essential to making sure that those websites are not exploited. So these are some of the reasons that you would actually use a UTM in the cloud. So as I mentioned, things like visibility. Taking a look, having good reports in one single place so you can see all this kind of stuff, including drop packets. Where's the traffic coming from? Bandwidth usage, really understanding what's going on. Because if you're just getting bigger bills based on bandwidth going in or out, whatever it might be from Amazon, it's good to understand exactly what's happening there. And seeing information in real time as well as historically is important as well, because then you can really understand, what's normal traffic versus what's anomaly traffic. As mentioned, one of the more common use cases we see for the UTM in Amazon is to protect things like web servers. So I mentioned before, having a web application firewall is essential to protect those type of resources, because a common firewall standard, just port-based firewall, is not really going to give you the type of protection you need so that you can guard against things like cross-site scripting attacks, SQL injection attacks, complicated form exploits, all these different things that people do, including what they call hot linking, so that people are effectively siphoning off and stealing your bandwidth. And all these things are things you need to guard against to make sure that the resources you put out there are not going to be exploited. So again, UTM can help you protect that, and that's actually a very, very popular thing that we do on Amazon, so that as you spin up web servers, you can put a UTM in place in front of it so that users actually connect to the UTM first. And of course, you can use some of the Amazon things such as elastic load balancers so that you distribute load properly. Now, it's not just web servers, of course, because it's very common to have things like database servers, for instance, CRMs, whatever it might be that you're running in Amazon. You still need this type of protection. So we have an IPS, which is going to give you those type of protections. It's going to take a look at different types of attacks that are related to, common application servers, whether it's, DNS exploits, common Microsoft exploits using the standard ports, etc. And it's able to alert you to these, these type of activities through, standard reporting like we saw on the screen, logging events, email alerts, syslog, a variety of different ways to really let you know what's going on. Because as we move these services up into the cloud, again, having that kind of visibility and understanding what's happening is really key to making sure it's secured. Now, most folks that are moving to the cloud are probably not doing it all at once. They're probably doing it, piece by piece, like we said. Maybe they'll move up the application servers first because that makes, sense from a cost perspective. They're still going to have on-site or physical infrastructure that they need to, control, and they need to then connect everything up together. And so the UTM can help with that because we can help support these type of hybrid networks, give you easy ways to connect the physical to your virtual resources. And we do that by either having UTM, say, on a physical site, communicating with a UTM up the cloud, or, just one of each. However you'd like to do it, there's options. And as mentioned, we are starting to see that some folks are actually outsourcing everything to something like AWS, whether it's a startup that's just becoming or just building out their infrastructure and is doing the entire thing in the cloud, or somebody who just realizes, well, it just doesn't make sense because we just don't have that big an office, or maybe all our users are remote. So what we're going to do is just actually run everything out of the cloud. But you're still going to need ways for people to connect securely, whether there's a couple people sitting in an office maybe, or the remote users need to connect. So you can run all of your security infrastructure from Amazon. And you can use things such as, for instance, our Red device or standard VPN tunnels to connect those remote offices so that you just have basically all the traffic sent over to Amazon and use that as your data center. And as mentioned, you could do something such as even manage your Wi-Fi from there. So if you had that kind of infrastructure, everybody's working out of their house, for instance, working out of small offices, you could manage Wi-Fi just as if it was a series of physical networks, just all done from Amazon. So there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of options, but it all really starts with trying to make it simple and giving you one spot where you can do all this from. Now, VPN users, we chose this actually for the Amazon test drive that we decided to work with Amazon on. And the reason was because, again, this is a very common use case. We see this quite often. People set up their resources on Amazon, everything's great, but then they really need to figure out, well, how do I get users securely connected? And how do I make sure that it's from different types of devices? Because if we are moving to the cloud, and if we have remote users, more and more, we're seeing that they're using not just a Windows laptop. They want to be able to connect in with something like an iPad, an Android phone, something along those lines, or maybe they want to have options for all those different things because on the weekends they're using the iPad, and during the week they're using a Windows phone or a Windows machine. So the idea is just to give you different options for different use cases, but to make it simple and secure. So that way you're protecting data, whether you're transferring it up or pulling it down from Amazon. Just making sure everybody, when they connect to those resources, they do so in a very secure manner. And so, again, we chose this as our use case for the Amazon Test Drive program. And if you probably are familiar with the Test Drive program if you're here, but if not, just briefly, the idea was just to simply give you a way to try out a solution like the Sophos UTM in a real-world scenario. So instead of just making the solution available, which of course it is, what we're trying to do is walk you through a scenario to try and highlight some of the things that we're talking about. Ease of use, flexibility, visibility, all these different things. And so that's what we've done. We actually built out a test drive which uses a VPN client, and for this one we chose the iOS VPN client. So if you have an iPad or an iPhone, what you can do is simply test out this test drive, which is configured to launch a fairly complex network on Amazon. So using some of the built-in Amazon tools such as CloudFormation, we basically have a framework which launches both public and private subnets. And what it does is launch the UTM into a public subnet and an application server into a private subnet, which doesn't have any access out to the internet except through the UTM. So it's a very secure environment, and the UTM for this test is, or this test drive is configured with a single VPN user account so that somebody could actually just right away start trying out the connection. So everything's set up. All you need to do is actually just try it out. And we've, of course, put together things such as a very detailed lab guide which steps you through this. And what's nice is it shows not only how the Sophos UTM can be used, but with our partner 8K Miles, it also shows the flexibility of Amazon because, through this type of simple template type of system that we're using what Amazon offers, we can create all this type of environment, including all the routing, firewall rules, everything that you need, very simply, and launch it just within a couple minutes, which really shows the power of a cloud solution like AWS. So to sign up for a test drive, there's a number of them up on Amazon Web Services. The Sophos test drive itself, you can do that either from Amazon's site, or you could just go directly to the link that I show you up there, which is just called testdrive.sophos.com. And you simply can, from there, create an account or sign in. You'll see there's a sign in button. And once you actually connect in, well, first you'll get an activation email just to prove that, you are a real person and not some kind of bot. You have to click on the link, and this is all standard stuff. If you don't get the email within about 15 minutes, I would check your junk folders. But once you do, you'll simply have to just confirm the account and set a password. And then once you log in, what you'll see at that point is that there'll just be an option for actually launching the lab. And when you launch the lab, you're going to see that there's links for a lab guide that I mentioned, which steps you through every single bit of it. There's a short video, which is going to walk you through everything, it has to do with the test drive, basically what we're talking about today. And then it'll also just take you through the different links which are available, which might be useful. Just about the Sophos UTM itself, some information on Sophos, different things like that. And finally, the output will show you, once you've launched the lab after about 5 minutes, it'll simply show you a couple links that you'll use with your lab guide. So it'll show you a user portal link, so you can get the client-side experience. It'll show you the UTM admin URL, so you can see it from the administrative side. And it'll also show you the private application URL, so that you can test connectivity and make sure everything's working correctly. So the whole idea is to show you two sides. The client side, how they're able to set up and use this very simply so that if somebody's out in the field, as well as the administrative side and how they can get good information on security events and users connecting in, how they can modify simply. And it all starts off once you start stepping through the guide by just logging in using the user portal URL. So I'm unable to show you very easily something from an iPad. So what I'm going to do is just show you how the user would log in. They would do this from something like their iPhone or their iPad. Just bring up Safari's browser. They'd simply log in. And within that, they would find that there's the iOS device configuration section. All they need to do is put in a password which is used to secure the export of all the configuration details and everything. They would then just click on install, and once they do, on their iOS device, it would simply pop up the option showing that they're actually connecting or they're trying to install something. So there'd be the regular iOS side install profile warning. It would show you the details about what it's trying to install, ask you to approve it, ask you to enter your password, which you had already set. And then within a couple steps, it's simply going to install. So very, very simple from the end user's experience, because once they've done that, they're all set. They can then swipe on that VPN option whenever they want to connect, put in the same credentials they used to enter that user portal. And the way we have it set up is that at that point you're able to simply connect through the UTM and through this VPN connection to that private application server. So to test connectivity, you would simply just take that private URL and from your iOS device, bring up the web page. So that'll show you how simple it is for users to be able to install and connect with one of these VPN clients. And that's just one of the options that we offer on the UTM. We actually have a number of different options available for users, and again, for different use cases. Now, the second part of the test drive shows from the administrator's perspective. So there's another URL that was part of that output, which was for the UTM itself. And so the users can just log in. And once they log in, they can take a look, of course, at anything they'd like to do. But quite simply, they can go and take a look at something like the remote access section. And from there, what they would see is the iOS device configuration set up. So what we had done, as I mentioned, was we pre-set up things such as allowing access to specific networks. This is where that private application server is hosted inside a private subnet on AWS. And we have our users who are allowed to connect in, including that test user we set up. And what you can do is, just to see how easy it is to work with the solution, is, for instance, you can create a new user and try and use that for VPN connectivity. You can enhance the security rules by, instead of using something like the automatic firewall rules that the UTM sets up for access for you, you could actually create your own firewall rules and be very specific. So this will show you how simple it is to create a policy for the user. So for instance, if I wanted to create a very specific rule for my VPN user, saying that they can only go to that, in this case, one server, which is the one they had tested access to. It's called the Alfresco instance. Using something like maybe remote desktop, I could just very simply write that rule just by using the drag and drop functionality. And that user then would only be allowed to use port 3389 to connect to that instance. Anything else would be denied. And I can even use advanced features such as time-based periods. Maybe I only want people logging in during certain times or not on the weekends. And of course, I can always log my traffic. So you can have that kind of information. And we also, I mentioned before, have quite a bit of visibility. So there's live logs, so you can actually see traffic if somebody says they're not connecting, see what's happening. There's real-time statistics, including things like country codes, so that if, for instance, I'm not doing any traffic with a certain location in the world, maybe I just want to choose to block it. And I can do that very simply with this country blocking feature. So that I can, for instance, say, I don't want any traffic coming in from that location, but maybe I do need to connect out to it. So now, I also mentioned before you can use other features to protect servers. Well, this is not actually part of the test drive, but when you're taking a test drive, you could actually do whatever you'd like. So if you wanted to, for instance, see how easy it is to set up IPS protection, it's as simple as just determining what you want to protect. In this case, either the entire network or just a single server if I wanted to. And once I actually click on apply, what we're going to do then is just actually look at any traffic going to that server and then match it against a automatically updated database of attacks, anomalies, etc. And as mentioned, we can set up different types of notifications so that we know what's happening, or quite simply, just gather statistics on that stuff so that we can run reports and understand what's happening. Now, we can also, as mentioned before, use our web application firewall. Now, this is something that some people may at first glance think would be a little complicated to set up, but we try to make it as simple as possible. We actually have predefined security policies which allow you to just protect against the most common types of threats. We use A/B scanning, which can be done for both uploads and downloads. We can block clients from questionable locations or with bad reputations. And all you really need to do is, once you've agreed with a profile, is just figure out which servers you want to actually protect. So if this was my web server, I could just choose to protect it using either plain HTTP, SSL, and then clients would be just connecting to this device instead of directly to that server. Then we could choose a domain or a certificate. And that's all we would need to do to actually set up a protection profile to make sure that that web server is not exploited. And again, once we've done all this stuff, we can be gathering information, whether it's remote access client logs and reports, which will show sessions and activities, network protection reports showing different violations throughout the day, month, year, or in detail, or even just network usage reports so I can understand my bandwidth. And once I understand that, we could use some of the built-in features to limit or shape that traffic by something like an IP or even an application, limiting, again, Skype, BitTorrent, all these different embedded applications. Now, the test drives typically, well, they are set up to last for 5 hours. So it's plenty of time to actually take a good look at what the UTM has to offer and try different scenarios out. There's no limits on what you can try out or test on that, and if you'd like to, you're welcome, of course, to then try it for longer if you need to. Now, one of the things that should be noted about Sophos and AWS is that we're not just taking our products and actually just throwing it up on Amazon's web services. We're actually working to make sure that it makes sense what we're doing. We're actually a good partner with AWS, and so we're trying to make sure we support their customers' needs. And what we've done to do that is we've actually set up so that there's different options for licensing. So you can license the Sophos UTM and its features with traditional licensing that people would be familiar with, which is for 1, 3, or 5-year terms. But we also offer support for Amazon's hourly instance pricing, because there's different use cases where people might want to use hourly pricing. And so what we've done is made it as simple as possible so that you can actually just combine the Sophos UTM functionality with the instance pricing for something like, say, a web server. And what you can do is actually go to the Amazon marketplace and very simply do a search on Sophos, and you'll see that there's already both options available, which you can then just quickly launch. So through this, for instance, in the hourly, you'll see the combined price, what it would cost to launch both a Amazon instance of a certain size and type, with the Sophos UTM products. And you can, of course, then choose if you'd like to launch it into a specific VPC, region, and create all the associated details. And using the standard tools that Amazon provides, you can get estimates and so forth and understand exactly what is going on. And we're continuing to evolve this product and the functionality on AWS. We actually have plans now for, and fairly soon should be out, is our scalable UTM. So this is an industry first. And what we're actually doing is taking advantage of a lot of the tools Amazon offers to do auto scaling, to do load balancing, integration with their different tools and infrastructure so that we can do all the UTM features, all the stuff that we've been talking about for firewalling, web application protection, intrusion prevention, VPN support. All this by integrating into a auto-scaling group so that as needed based on whatever metrics you might provide, load increasing, connections increasing, you're able to automatically create new UTMs which can all work together to handle that increased load. And then, of course, as that load decreases, with the regular Amazon model of, elasticity, you can just then decommission or, just basically kill off those additional UTMs so that you're only paying for what you use. So it'll give you a true scalability, that horizontal scaling that Amazon customers really like, but the same exact UTM functionality that we've been talking about. And that's all part of what Sophos is trying to offer. We're trying to take some very good security technology and give you different options for using it. So we have a range of different products, and they're all focused on security, but they're also designed to be as simple as possible, but also to support different types of environments, including cloud, of course. So whether it's on-premise or virtual, cloud-based solutions, a combination, what we're trying to do is give you the tools you need to secure the network, protect users and their data, and just make sure that everything is done as simply as possible. Now, this screen that you see on right now is what we call our common architecture. And what it's really trying to do is show you how all of our products fit together. So we have in orange products like our UTM, which can protect traffic going across perimeters. Different types of traffic, whether it's web or email, different types of networks, physical, cloud, Wi-Fi. The whole idea is to give you that consistent level of protection. And then we have tools which protect the users through things like endpoint protection. I mentioned before protecting desktops, whether they're virtual or physical, servers, and increasingly mobile devices as well, because everybody's worried about BYOD, and how do I make sure that as I'm using something like Dropbox, that I'm going to actually secure that data and make sure it's protected no matter where it might be. That's where tools like our encryption product suite comes in, so that I can say that there's encryption automatically applied to things such as data put into cloud folders, right? As well as data that might be on disks, in file shares, even on a USB stick. So again, the whole goal is to just make sure we're protecting users and data on or off the network in a very simple, easy, consistent fashion. Sorry about that. So, sorry, Windows 7 sometimes screws things up there a little. Let me just get that back. But that was just giving you a couple quick links, which can show you exactly where you can go for help. There we go. We're getting back. So we got our Sophos website, which has, of course, information on all our products, including the UTM. And we actually have a Sophos landing page, which gives you a good amount of information, including a data sheet, information on that upcoming elastic firewall, we're calling it, The AWS Marketplace is a great resource, of course, and that's where you can go and actually try out the Sophos UTM for a longer period than you would find for the 5 hours in the test drive. And then we also put our partner 8K Miles there because they did do a lot of the heavy lifting and building that test drive. And it's something that we plan to add to with new labs, trying out different scenarios and features, including things for web application firewall. And for resources, just general security resources, one of the things we always like to point out is we have a phenomenal blog called Naked Security. This is great for just general security tips and to give you information about what's happening. We also have a corporate blog, which has a lot of AWS references and stories and talks, and of course, contact information. And with that, I'd like to take a couple questions if anybody has them, and I'll turn it back over to Gina.
Thanks, Bill. What a great presentation, very detailed. Appreciate you taking us through AWS, the UTM offering, as well as the complete security offering with Sophos. As a reminder to the attendees, if you do have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the questions box in GoToMeeting. With that said, Bill, I do have a few questions for you from the audience. The first question is, who can use Sophos Cloud UTM on AWS?
Well, anybody could actually use it, whether it's a partner or a customer. There's no restrictions. You know, as I mentioned, all of the functionality is enabled and available through the AWS Marketplace. The only thing that might be needed is if you were going to use the BYOL option, you'd have to get a license from Amazon. Sorry, not from Amazon, from Sophos, so that you could just, you know, try it out for a few days, whatever it might be. The hourly licensing is ready to go. You could just spin it up and start using it immediately.
Great. Is there a typical customer that you've seen grab a hold of UTM in AWS? Are there any use cases that Sophos has seen?
Well, I mean, we've seen quite a variety of different customers and use cases. I tried to highlight some of the most common ones that we've seen, which really, again, have to do with things like protecting web servers, connecting users securely, supporting hybrid environments where part of the infrastructure is in your physical network and then you move stuff up to the cloud. But so those are going to be some of the more common use cases, and customers range from, you know, startup businesses. We have a lot of healthcare and government clients because there's a lot of those on Amazon. And increasingly, we're seeing a lot of government customers because Amazon is actually offering a GovCloud, a very secure region, which is just for government customers. And Sophos has been working with them on that to make sure that customers on GovCloud can actually, you know, use the Sophos UTM in the same way we've been talking about.
Great, thank you. Last question that I have here, can you explain the differences, again, in the bring your own license in that they would purchase from Sophos versus the hourly option that is available on the marketplace?
Sure. Well, functionally, the UTM acts exactly the same. The only difference is that with the BYOL, or bring your own license option, you're going to Sophos, or actually through a certified partner of Sophos, and you're purchasing a term of 1, 3, or 5 years for the license. And with that, you can also be very granular because you can pick and choose features that you'd like to use. With the hourly license, the way it works is that all the features are bundled together, and you're just given a one price per instance hour. So tied to, you know, whatever instance type, you're just going to have the additional software charge for all UTM functionality. So it's a nice quick way because what you can do there is you get one bill from Amazon for all that functionality instead of having to have an additional license. Now, that may make sense in some cases, and may not make sense in others, because if you have it on all of the time, which, you know, a UTM security product typically would be on all the time, it may make more sense to actually use something like your BYOL license. But you have the tools on Amazon to figure that out, and that's why we do offer both options. You know, the hourly instance pricing may be useful so that you can test things out, or maybe to protect a development environment that may not be in place for longer than a month or two. BYOL might be for your production environment. So you have options.
Wonderful. So with that said, Bill, it looks like we've wrapped up the webcast here. To all those attendees, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. As a reminder, this recording and webcast was recorded and will be made available on demand for your review and viewing. You'll receive an email with the link, so please feel free to share with your coworkers or colleagues or with your local partner should they have any additional questions around AWS and the Sophos security offerings within Amazon. We hope you enjoyed the webcast today, and we look